So here we are. And this is, I think, the 5th episode of Life with Bob. And this is my opportunity to introduce a lot of my friends to some wonderful people who I know. So I'm here with my very good friend and colleague, Mayor Ed Malloy, Mayor of Fairfield, Iowa, our fair city. And we're going to have an opportunity to talk about something that I think is really important, and that is creating community. How do we create community? How do successful communities actually come about? And Ed is an exemplar. I love to recount the time when I was talking to our Congressman, Dave Loebsack, and he said, you know, Ed Malloy, I think, is the most effective mayor that I know in the United States. Well, whether that's the case or not, he is a darned effective mayor, and he's done a bang-up job for us, both as a city council person for, 6 years, Ed, and then going on the 19th year as mayor, a long time.
Yeah, 18 years and 8 years on the city council. So 26 years in local government, which has been a great opportunity and a lot of fun.
That's really terrific. Ned and I have had an opportunity to work together on a number of fairly major projects. We'll talk about that. But let's wind things back, Ed, to really looking at the essentials. Fairfield is known as a very vibrant community, small community. Actually, we've grown. We've increased our population by 1,000 since the last census, and that's something which is extraordinarily rare for rural Iowa. So there's some kind of secret in the sauce here. And I think one of those secrets, Ed, has been your leadership. So let's talk for a moment about your experience with building community, because that's really what we've done here.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. And really, it's a great pleasure to be talking with you and to share some of these ideas. You know, they're pretty basic. I really love people and I love human interactions. So being involved in local government just gives me an opportunity in a structured way to reach all parts of the community. And I think that's important. You know, what you're doing here tonight is a form of communication that that will build understanding and build community. And when it's applied to where you are and who you're living with and who you're sharing, you know, this wonderful city and this wonderful community experience with, is where that essential value comes from. So I really believe in the basic human goodness of everyone and their ability to sort of find within themselves, whether they're looking deeply or whether it's just some simple passion that they have, to share it with the community and share it with everyone. And I think what leadership, the role of leadership, is to seek out all of those different people who aspire to build something together and allow them to, to work within a community platform to share ideas and to start moving and building things together. We have a lot of, experience with that. But, it really starts with, our community is 180 years old this year. It was founded in 1839. And when you start looking at the history of the community, you really start to see the connections that have been built across time. We're known as a very entrepreneurial community because we've had interest through Maharishi University of Management in drawing people from all over the country and all over the world. And out of that grew, many opportunities for developing new business structures and new cultural networks and new opportunities like that. But when we look back at our history, we really see that Fairfield has always been that way. Fairfield has always been entrepreneurial, and it has always had ties to higher education and to arts and culture. And it's fascinating to see it in the context of that span of time. So we are, responsible for our government and our community at this point in time, and everything that we contribute is contributing to that same essential community that was started 180 years ago. And because of that, I think there's a depth to the pride that we all feel for how good it is to live together and share community experience, and for the things that we do that are new, that build upon the community that has come before us, whether it's better form of government or becoming more responsible for our our environment and our resources, or becoming more creative and employing more ingenuity in the way that we do the things that we are empowered to do within government. And that's something that that is a very powerful experience. So the sense of community and how that manifests, there's so many elements to our community. There's schools and education. There are recreational programs. There are the interests of thousands of people and how those are expressed, most passionately in a way that you can share with everyone. And what happens is, we've built a community that is just so damn interesting. It's just so interesting because there's a lot to learn. There's, a great deal of life experience that people have that is appreciated and shared, with everyone in that community experience. And, we're all the beneficiaries of that. Iowa is the first state in the nation in every 4 years for the presidential primary and caucuses. And as we speak, there is a 2020 Democratic candidate that is speaking at a town hall on gun violence right now. And this is going to be repeated over and over again within our community, where potential leaders of our nation are going to come here and look at our community and see something that maybe they've never seen before. And it's something that we can share because of what we've built as a community. So I'm rambling a little bit here, but I guess, my point is that communities are fascinating, and they are fascinating because of the people who have built them, and they build them over time. And in the present, what's going on is very powerful here in Fairfield.
It's really great. And, I often quote your description of Fairfield as the city of 1,000 passions, which approximately means that for every 10 people, there's a different passion. And that's a great power. There's also something about the way your particular leadership has helped develop the community. Our family's been here since 1984. I came back to the community in 2006 and have really seen a dramatic difference in the community, since the early 2000s when you started to have your tenure. And I think there's something about a concept that our friend Bert Chanowski and other people talk about, asset quilting, or bottom up and top down. Let's talk about that, the actual mechanics. How do you help a community be really powerful, be really entrepreneurial? Because not every community is expressing this. Every community has the potential to express it, but how do you make that potential come alive?
Right. Well, Bob, I really believe in organized activity. And I think that structures around, creative expression are good things and are fun things to build. And again, I believe it starts with that human interaction of sharing ideas. And I think when you open that up, and I think that's what I've looked to do as a leader, is to open up as many opportunities as I can for people to share their passions and to share their interests. And we've done that at the community level a few times with a planning process where we are going to look strategically out 10 or 20 years. And we're going to start with a vision, and we're going to start with green lighting all of the different ideas and goals and things that people see are possible, or what they would like to see in their community. And when those are shared together with people who have deep roots within the community, people who are new to the community, people who are professionals and in a number of different areas, you start to vet the ideas in a way that gets really fundamental and down to earth. And that's where the ideas can really start to take root, because people start to get a sense of what our common vision is and what our common values are. And some of the ideas are at the extremes of that range, and they're not necessarily going to distill fully into the, to the final vision, but pieces of that are going to be there. So when we do that, and then we turn that in again into a framework of goals and opportunities for, building something, then we see that, I'm going to just disconnect this phone because that ring is breaking my chain of thought. There we go. So what we, yeah, right. So anyway, what we come out of it with is a set of goals and objectives that are those stepping stones for accomplishing our vision. And when we go through that process, there's a great amount of fulfillment in that, because there's activity, there's engagement, there are people working together, there are people who have, they share themselves, they share their time, they share their resources, and they do it in a way that builds something that once it's achieved and accomplished, there's a great sense of pride in. And the more you replicate that within a community, the more you do that, you really have a sense that everyone has a piece of what it is that they're passionate about as skin in the game. They can, whatever it is that makes them happy, and whatever it is that makes their network of community friends happy, is something that makes it the place that they want to be and they want to live. And then they look around them and they see that everyone is having that same experience. And the sense of community just grows stronger and stronger from that.
It's really so powerful. So let's talk about the first time we used this. We used Institute for Decision Making, which is a great organization from University of Northern Iowa. It has a very definite process, and out of that came the Strategic Economic Plan of 2003. And let's just go over some of some of those values, because these are not small things. The massive, huge, big projects, amazing projects came from that.
Right.
Including the Go Green Plan of 2009. So let's talk about the practicality, because it can seem a little abstract. Get together, talk about, do goals. Yeah. How does this actually work?
Well, what excited me becoming mayor was the fact that I had the opportunity to try and build a lot of bridges within the community to, again, reach that potential that I saw and I believed was there. And I felt that the professionally led strategic planning process was the way to go, because, again, I'd been involved in those and I saw the dynamics of what takes place of the people who together make that commitment to think and envision on behalf of everyone else in the community. And going through that process it's a very responsible process, because you really do have to think, what are others going to feel about this, and think about this. Is this in everyone's best interest? Is this what we really want? But out of it comes a lot of very big ideas, things that you really maybe hadn't thought of before, or it gives a structure and a voice to ideas that maybe have been around for a while, but nobody's really focused on them to see how we go about accomplishing that as a community. We knew that we were a highly cultural community. During the 1990s, we had 5 local theater organizations. And the people who headed these theater troupes were professionally trained actors, either in college or had worked in Los Angeles or New York. And there was this great desire to do more and more of that, and to share all of the productions that these theater organizations were doing. But we didn't have a good facility. We have a nice high school auditorium, but that basically is scheduled for the high school. So there really wasn't a lot of time. So small theaters were kind of growing up in the most unlikely places. We thought, why not build ourselves a world-class theater? And those ideas surfaced in the mid to late 90s. And then by the time we got around to our strategic planning process, we put it in as one of our major goals. We had folks that were passionate about hiking, and they saw the opportunity to build a trail system within our community. And it had been a notion, an intention, an idea. And then when it was raised to that level of priority through a planning process, it broke out. And we accomplished that. We built a 16-mile loop trail around our city, which is just a beautiful, beautiful asset that really just allows every neighborhood to have its touch with nature. And so there were so many different projects that came out of that. And again, as we started to fulfill all of that through the process of engagement and action and really getting everyone on board, working with fulfilling these objectives, when we finished our plan, we had 5 overarching goals, 70 objectives, and 80 organizations locally that had signed on to help us achieve these. As we started,
let's put a pin in that point and talk about that, Ed, because again, looking at the mechanics of building support, the bane of many planning processes is elites get together, and it's even a number of elites. They get together, or people who are just kind of in the know. They say, this is the great plan, and it doesn't go anywhere because no one's involved. This whole idea of developing a plan where you get 80 organizations signed off, either as a primary or secondary driver of those 80 objectives. So when the plan was unveiled, it was the planners and 80 organizations that spanned every element of our community.
Right. Well, Bob, it's a great point, because those 80 organizations, first of all, they are your resources. They are your human resources. Those are the people that already have a stake in what it is that we want to fulfill. So usually it was a combination of several organizations that would take responsibility for one particular objective. So it could be spread out across the community. And again, with 80 organizations, you are really truly reaching into all parts of your community. And when they're focused on single objectives or multiple objectives, and that's going on across the community for the whole time, all of a sudden you just start to see changes that you never thought were possible within the community. And everybody's seeing that, and everybody's feeling that. So now you're creating a new culture. You're creating a culture of what is possible. And that is extremely important, because there are so many communities that when a good idea comes up, well, we'll never be able to do that, or we'll never be able to accomplish that, or that's too big an idea for our community, or I don't know anybody who really wants to do that. And it's just not the case, because if you take the time and give people that framework and that opportunity to go through a process, that process unfolds the idea in a way that seems logical, like, yeah, we can do that. If we just, there are always things that you have to push and that you have to reach for, but you do see the possibility in it. So after we published the plan and we started all of these different objectives, going in many different directions, and we saw, great accomplishment, again, people feeling that. Now people start to take notice from outside of your community. What's happening in Fairfield? What is this going on? And at the same time, you mentioned earlier that Fairfield is extraordinary because of its size and its placement in rural Iowa, where you would think that there would be challenges that would be insurmountable for some of the things that we have accomplished. Right. And across America, everyone's trying to figure this out. They're trying to figure, how are we going to keep people in our rural cities, and how are we going to revitalize them and redefine them so that they have a relevancy to a modern America. And I think we've become a good model for that in so many different ways. And we're always inspired to continue to reinvent ourselves and to add to that. But we've done enough to where we've changed that culture, as I mentioned earlier. to a culture of possibility, so that we know that anything we set our minds to, we can do. We understand limitations. We understand sometimes you're not going to get everything. And that's a point where I can jump off to the 2009 Go Green Strategic Plan, where you personally, along with a handful of others, inspired me to make that next reach in our community. We had talked about sustainability as a principle in our 2003 plan. We set an objective to be known as a knowledge-based authority on sustainable practices and sustainable living. It was kind of a nod given to those people who were already doing it in their lives and were willing to share that information. But we thought, we can be a leading community. We can do things that are important for our country and important for our community through that collective planning process again. It was 2008, we were going into the financial crisis. Energy prices were at an all-time high. And I think America was worried about what our near and long-term future was going to be going into this unpredictable chasm of uncertainty. And it's a time for hopefulness. It's a time for saying, now, what is it that we can do to ensure that we can sustain ourselves? So we went through the planning process again with the Institute for Decision Making out of the University of Northern Iowa. And we worked for a year to put together a new strategic plan centered around a sustainable community, centered around a community that understands its responsibility in conservation in all manners and in all ways, and understands its connection to nature and to healthy foods, and understands that as a society, we're going to make a transition from one form of energy use to another form of energy use, and we want to be leaders in that. We understand that there are going to be different modes of transportation. We want to prepare for that. So we went through the process, and we came up, again, with a plan that everyone could do a little bit of something in. And since that time, Fairfield has seen the development of 4 megawatts of distributed solar energy. We've went through a process where we worked with our utility company to do a real in-depth energy conservation throughout the whole community. We set a goal, a 15-month goal of reducing our energy consumption by 4%. We doubled that. We reduced it by 8.5%. And again, we created another part of our culture to where now every time we look at something, whether it's something that we're building or something that we're doing new, we're going to turn to those sustainable principles and make sure that's a part of who we are.
It's so interesting, Ed, that in every plan, you have what's in the plan, then you have the momentum that the plan creates, that then creates all kinds of things that you may not have actually had in the plan. As it turns out, I didn't want you to mention, I want to mention that one of the results of the 2003 plan is the Fairfield Arts and Convention Center, which is really a center of our life. It's right in the center of the city. And it's, I believe, it ended up being a $9 million project. We have a 540-seat proscenium theater, which is as beautiful a theater as you'll ever find. Stephen Sondheim, the great lyricist, the great playwright, gave naming rights. In fact, in the natural order of things, we got our Sondheim theater before New York did. It's really quite exceptional. These are not small projects. These are huge at-scale projects. And then out of the Go Green plan came that amazing reduction in energy. This came from Alliant Energy's, what was the name of it?
Hometown Rewards.
Hometown Rewards, right. Now, as it turns out, apparently we were the only community to actually finish.
Yeah.
And when we were doing it up front, and we created another little mini planning session, planning group. And when people saw, what we created, said, where did this come from? And it all came from the creativity and the power and the energy and the expertise that had been developed in the community. And so it happened. And so in this Hometown Rewards program, we had a whole bunch of goals. And one of them was to reduce by 4% our absolute energy consumption. And Alliant Energy said, they're there. It's a very nice plan, very impressive. But the 4%, that's not really practical. And so we're going to give you your award, which was solar panels on the library, or money toward that, even if you don't do that.
Right.
We said, impractical, game on. And we did a full 18-month community-based social marketing. We had 50% of the people who live in town touch that in some way, do some action, whether it's write on a petition or show up to a workshop or do something. And lo and behold, out of that came an 8% reduction, which I believe, if I'm not wrong, is saving our community $1 million a year. Now, $1 million is circulating inside Fairfield that isn't going to outside, to our energy company. And if you do a 2 or 3 or whatever multiple of pass around effect that has, that begins to be really, really, really significant. So these, again, are not small impacts. So they're quite substantial, aren't they?
They are. It's a great point, Bob. And just to continue on that point, also one of our principles in the plan was to demonstrate sustainable living practices. And we believed that the more people simply saw something new, that they would understand it. So with solar alone, we had one of our commission members who was a recent graduate of Maharishi University of Management, Troy Van Beek, and his wife, Amy, who were inspired. Troy was a commission member. He was so inspired by this. And he thought, wow, I can get out into the community and I can talk to people about what I'm passionate about, which is energy conservation. And he was going to do energy audits. And he said, I could build solar arrays for folks. And then he started digging into the economics of solar and would build out pro formas for people to see where they would get a return on their investment and how much energy they would save and how much it would displace of carbon. And we started to see solar arrays going up on homes and on businesses. And what tickles me is that at the end of our plan, we had met with the 5 banks that were represented in Fairfield at that time. And we asked them if they would be willing partners for low interest loans for solar, or just fair interest loans on solar. And they were really all on board. When they started seeing applications come in and looked at the return on investment, we had several bank buildings that put up their own solar arrays.
Right.
So now, you look back and from a community that maybe had, I'm going to guess, 100,000 kilowatts of solar power, distributed throughout the whole city. Now that we're at a point where we're over 4 megawatts. It's been incredible. And it just came from the demonstration. There was no policy involved. There were no special incentives. There were, not from the city, but from the utility company and also from state and federal tax incentives. But the point is, people educated themselves and they saw the value and they took that leap and they did it. And this is Iowa, it's not Northern California.
And we now have an array that is one of the most advanced technically in the Midwest. MUM, our campus, our university campus, is now, I think, a third or 40% of their energy comes from solar. And we have a 1 megawatt array, which is approximately 5 acres of panels, and a 1.1 megawatt hour of batteries, in big, shipping containers and all that, and they're tracking arrays. There is no such combination of technologies except here. And we didn't necessarily envision that. But again, out of the efficacy, out of getting better at things, we just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we end up doing disruptive projects like that, things that are really a cut above.
And Bob, at the same time, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that, again, we have this 180-year-old city and community, and we're just as passionate about restoring historic barns or redoing the facades on our historic buildings in the downtown or preserving a Civil War monument in one of our parks. It really is contagious. It's just whatever it is that you feel is important within a community, and you will make a commitment to your community to share your passion and to help a project get done, is just wonderful. Just wonderful to be a living part of a community like that.
That's right. Dave Neff had the vision. Others had the vision of Marsden Barns. Ron Blair, bless his heart, what is it, almost a 20-year project in putting the loop trail together. These require a lot of work and a lot of staying power. And honestly, a lot of resilience when things go upside down. Some of these projects, the Arts and Convention Center went through a very difficult period. We had to raise more money out of the community, and we did it. We did it because inside of ourselves, we have a collective vision. We're good at things. Yeah,
right.
There's a problem. We're going to get that solved. And there's an issue there, but yeah, we can solve that. And so maybe to kind of wrap up, and I'm going to definitely have to have you come on again, because we've just covered a small little sliver of all the things we could have talked about. But I think there's a general sense among some folks that government is not the solution, it's a problem. So what do we say? How do you view the facilitative role of government? Because we're very progressive, but I know you to be very, very financially responsible and conservative, and we don't throw a lot of money at things from a governmental standpoint. What we do, what I have seen you do, and I think this generalizes out of government into family, into our businesses, into our relationships, because I think it's really important to be able to look at these principles we're talking about, not just about what a town will do, but exactly the same principles can be applied to our own personal lives. Planning and being intentional about things, our family life, our businesses, our churches, our clubs, every element of society can take some lessons from this. And so what about this top down and bottom up? What's that about?
Yeah, fortunately for city government, there's not a whole lot of top down. We're providing, some basic services for folks, and the services they expect. They expect to be protected. So we have first responders and police and fire, and they expect to have good streets and good schools and good basic infrastructure. We provide, clean water, and we're building now a new $25 million wastewater treatment plant, which will carry our community for the next 100 years. So again, that continuity factor. But aside from that, government can play the role of a partner. We will set the framework and the boundaries for zoning and for, how the community is kind of put together from a land perspective. We can also have shared goals with private partners. The Arts and Convention Center is a city-owned building, but it was, half the money was raised privately, and there are still hundreds of thousands of dollars that support it annually from private donors. We recently completed a new outdoor swimming pool and an indoor recreation center, the first that we've ever had in our community, with 3 beautiful gymnasium floors and a walking track. And it was nearly a $10 million project, of which, again, half was raised privately, because the private sector has confidence that government will take care of that facility, run it, and it's an important amenity. So we're always looking for that. We partner with developers, we partner with new manufacturing companies. We're there to say that, we will provide the services to the best of our ability to grow our community, but to also satisfy our citizens. We want to satisfy people that they're getting everything that they want within their community. Our library is absolutely wonderful. It's a wonderful building. They provide a wonderful service. And we have the traffic of a city 3 times our size that goes through our library because of what we put into it and because of the passion in our community. So in so many ways, the partnership and the connection between government and a community is one that should be government listening to its citizens, working with its citizens, and providing what it is that they expect. And in response, from a fiscal standpoint, we can only do what is possible, and we also get the message that people don't want to be burdened with tax. So that's why the private sector has really stepped up, and when we want to do a big project, they've been there to help us with that.
Yeah, it's really quite extraordinary. So what I'm thinking, Ed, I think we have taken enough of people's time tonight. What I'd like to do is do a couple of more segments as we go along. And one of them would be, how do we develop the entrepreneurial community we have? Because when everything is said and done, if the money isn't there,
yeah,
if the economic vitality isn't there, and we have created a city that punches so far above its weight, it's almost hard to imagine from an economic standpoint, from a growing business inside. So let's do that.
Yeah.
Also, I understand that part of the impelling vision of the economic development plan was Richard Florida's work about creating a creative class in a community, that if you really focus on the arts as a way of developing creativity or fostering creativity or inviting creativity in, guess what? Creative people show up.
Right.
And creative people don't only do art, they do business. Or
right.
They do civic. They participate. Like in our town of 10,000, we have just slightly under 200 nonprofit organizations. Now, some of them are not very active,
right.
but that's a nutty number.
Yeah.
For such a tiny.
Yeah, it's all part of it. Philanthropy, creativity, and actually, one of the goals in the back of my mind was to change the character of the town enough so that people who grew up here would be comfortable coming back or staying, just based on understanding that my community is always moving and always progressing forward.
Right, and so my informal baby carriage measure outside of Cafe Paradiso is a really good one. I was there the other day and there was 4 or 5 or 6 baby carriages there. There's a big influx of people either coming back or deciding that Fairfield is a really cool place to live. So we're going to do that. So we're going to do entrepreneurship, and we're going to do arts. We're looking at an entrepreneurial arts community, if you will. Then we'll look at consciousness, because there is an element that we haven't talked about that where we have some degree of an edge in Fairfield. And I know I was sitting in your great room with a Renaissance group, I believe, a group of, ecumenical group of people from all political parties, all persuasions, but all leaders, talking about, I would say, some fairly esoteric concepts, and in a very matter-of-fact way. And I just looked around the audience and I was going, yeah, that makes sense. So there's something very powerful about what happens when you have a community that values consciousness, that values the inner development, because the outer really reflects the inner. So with that, any final comments from our folks before we sign off?
I just, if you have something that you feel you would like to contribute in your own way within your community, don't hesitate. Just, find the leaders. They're people, they're individuals, they have a role to play, but they really do appreciate, the passions of their citizens, and get a hold of one of them and express your ideas and become a part of a community process.